Welcome to the third day of Yule, when we attend to the restless dead on their wild hunt and to the Yuletide bestiary. It's getting hair-raising now, folks. What is the wild hunt? Well, the wild hunt is a European folklore motif involving a large, ghostly hunting party comprised of the souls of the dead and deities associated with the underworld, and it travels through the sky at night on horseback. Anyone caught out could be swept up and carried away by the Yule riders in this hunting party. Therefore, everyone would stay inside at night. Some say that the wild hunt begins at Samhain, also known as Halloween, and is at its height on the winter solstice. In modern Wicca, the wild hunt is celebrated on the winter solstice. However, in folklore traditions from across Europe, including Britain, Ireland, Wales, France, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Germany, Switzerland, Italy, Slovenia, and the Netherlands, the dates can range from early November to late January and can last from 1 to 3 days to as much as 9 weeks. Usually headed by a female supreme being, such as Perchta in Germany and Austria, or Gudrun Horsetail in the Norse tradition, the wild hunt is also known as the Ride of the Furious Army, or Oskareia, the Terrifying Ride. In Sweden, the wild hunt is headed by Lucy the Hag, an earlier version of the Christianized Saint Lucy, and the horde of demons that follow her through the sky are called the Luciferda. People were afraid to fall asleep on the eve of midwinter, lest their soul be taken by a traveling demon, so they would stay up all night for the Lucivaka, a vigil called the Lucy Wake. Folk stories of the wild hunt often have two central motifs: horses and feasting. Across ancient Europe, horses have held a connection to the spiritual realms and the land of the dead. They perform the role of psychopomp, the one who conveys the souls of the dead to their resting place across the veil. This is why they were so often sacrificed with their owners in ancient Celtic, Scandinavian, Germanic, and Eurasian cultures. Celebrations in honor of the myth of the wild hunt acknowledge not only horses, but also the other animal familiars involved, like the hunting dogs, the wild boar, and the deer. Baked ham is a popular meal on this night because it was the prized game of the wild hunt. Sometimes 3 shafts of wheat would be left in the fields after harvest for Glosso, the glowing sow with fiery eyes, and Bristles, who left a trail of sparks wherever she went. On this night, she'd be left offerings of fish and gruel to appease her, so no harm would come to the farm. In medieval times in Lapland, people would make little boat ornaments out of birch bark and hang them from trees outside. Then they'd place a morsel of their supper in it and leave it out, so the furious army had something to eat as they passed through. This was a night when we might expect hauntings, so you would do everything you could to honor and appease the restless dead and make sure that they would pass easily without stopping at your house. So let's talk about feeding our ancient dead and then the animal familiars. This is the night when we remember those ones from way back, the ones whose names are forgotten to time, and whose souls may not be at rest. To honor and appease them, we might prepare a traditional dish from the place where our way-back people lived. We might place an offering of a fancy plate full of food outside overnight. In Bulgaria, during this Feast of the Dead, offerings are placed near the hearth. This is a good night for lighting incense and offering the smoke as food for the restless spirits of the dead who've not been fed with love for a long, long time. Even just some dried cedar boughs, crushed and sprinkled on a fire, can create beautiful incense offerings. Note that we're not talking about calling in the troubled souls here. No, that's not what we're doing at all. We're merely sending a loving thought, not asking them to come hang out with us. If anything, you want to practice protection-style rituals, not summoning work at this time. This is a good night for all kinds of wintry ghost stories, too. Charles Dickens didn't invent the Christmas ghost story tradition with A Christmas Carol, and quite frankly, the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and future are awfully tame compared to some of the cannibalism and bloodshed of ye old festive holiday season. There are positively chilling folk traditions found nearly everywhere that seriously beg the question whether parents even liked their children very much for all they kept scaring them half to death. For example, the mythology surrounding Perchta of the pagan Alpine tradition is particularly hair-raising. She would leave coins in the boots of good children, but disembowel the bad ones and stuff them with hay. Perchta is like a female counterpart to Krampus, that scary goat man of Central European pagan traditions. Yeah, the big horns and hooves of a goat, hairy body, huge tongue, and fangs with the face of the devil, that guy who steals the bad children. From Hungary, we hear of Chert, another scary goat man who wears chains on his wrists and carries birch trees and beats the children with them with the branches. In Romania, we hear of vampires who clawed their way out of their earthly graves and tried to break the locks on your house. The only way of keeping them out was to stuff your keyholes with garlic cloves, which is not exactly the heartwarming nostalgia of the smell of gingerbread cookies wafting through the house, but at least you are not having all of your blood drained. In Turkey, there's talk of werewolves who might come visit during Yuletide. In fact, if you were born during the 12 days of Yule, you stood a good chance of becoming a werewolf. Actually, the wolf folklore is a holdover from an ancient Roman Mother's Day festival held in February that honored the wolf mother that suckled Romulus and Remus, the founding brothers of Rome. It was a long winter season of honoring the wolf, actually, that's been mapped onto Yule. Since wolves are pack animals and very social, many of the folktales around Yule end up as kind of convivial gatherings, actually, of wolves who might descend on your village square and perhaps steal a keg of your beer for their festivities. In Greece, they tell of tales of the Kalakantzaros, a sort of shaggy man similar to a werewolf, and also of the Lamia, a mortal human but demon-like female driven mad with grief at the death of her own child. She roams the earth devouring children who are caught wandering too far from home. A roast-suckling pig would be offered to the Lamia and to the Kalakantzaros to fool them into thinking it was a human newborn. Nowadays, really any kind of pork offering will do, like pork sausages or a bit of your roast ham. The Sami people, indigenous to Northern Europe, warned their children of a child-devouring half-troll, half-man named Stalo. He liked to cook children before eating them, so at least they had a chance to escape while he was distracted by stoking the fire or chopping the onions. He was also greedy for gold and silver, but the Sami people had no metallurgy. They made tools from materials that were plentiful, such as stones and bones and reindeer antler and leather. It seems that the myth of Stalo is something of a metaphor for the Norse and Finnish settlers who did have metallurgy and placed a high value on silver, gold, and currency in general. They say the Stalo represents the ghosts of the early invaders who died and were buried with their supposed wealth on the lands of the Sami. And let's not forget Iceland's troll giantess, Grilla, who ate children in stews but still loved her own 13 Yule lad sons. The 13 Yule lads range in temperament from goofy to pretty much full-on homicidal, and they come to visit Iceland's children in the 13 days leading up to Christmas. And then you've got your other St. Nicholases, Ruklaus, whose name means rough claws, who like to beat children, again with birch rods, and Ashenklaus, or Ashy Claus, who carried a sack of ashes for clobbering kids and getting their Christmas clothes dirty so they'd get into trouble. This is why we have jingle bells all around during Yuletide. It's almost universally accepted that anything jingling or jangling will keep away hostile spirits. So get out your protective jingle bells, and if you hear them on the Christmas tree, you know you've got the good kind of Santa Claus coming to you and not a mean one. If you're not into hair-raising spookiness at this time of year, no worries. There are so many animal familiars or companions associated with Yuletide that we can acknowledge them tonight. Though, to be honest, some of them are kind of spooky too. Of course, Santa's reindeer easily come to mind. The reindeer are a representation of the mother goddess. Yes, female reindeer do keep their antlers in winter, and mostly the males don't. So there's a strong argument to be made that Santa's reindeer are all females. Also, the cattle and donkey of the nativity story are kind of worth mentioning, perhaps. There's also Odin's flying gray horse, Sleipnir, for whom children would stuff their boots with hay and carrots and lumps of sugar. There are also the black ravens of Northern mythology who would listen from rooftops to spy on children to see who was naughty or nice and then inform on them to Thor. And let's remember the pair of white goats who pulled Thor's chariot, Cracker and Gnasher, who flew down chimney holes unafraid of fire since it's Thor's natural element. Yule goats are widely found in Denmark, Sweden, and Norway, where in some areas children leave their shoes under their bed filled with grains on Christmas Eve in exchange for gifts. The German Habersack is a Yuletide horse character recreated by basically draping a white sheet over an upside-down broom or branch stick. They really go all out with this sort of Yuletide horse antic in Wales, where it's called the Merry Lude. They place the skull of a horse skeleton on a broomstick and fill the eye sockets with glass Christmas ball ornaments. Then a man carries the broomstick with the horse head above him, and his body is fully draped in a white sheet. He's escorted by a party of revelers, and they all go door to door singing songs and asking to be let in and demanding food and drink. You should really just Google Merry Lude costume. It's kind of bonkers. The horses are featured also prominently in Denmark, Norway, Sweden, and Finland as far back as the Middle Ages. The young men would have ritual horse races on frozen lakes and rivers, the winner earning himself a new cloak, an honor among his people. There were also races specific to springs still rising from underground, and whoever's horse got the first drink from the spring would ensure good health for his entire herd in the year to come. And then, of course, there are stories about Yule cats and dogs. The Yule dogs are actually 24 daughters of the Teutonic witch goddess Berchta, who also, again, goes by the name Holla, who take on the form of dogs on Christmas Eve. Frau Holla travels with her pack of wild hound daughters looking for open doors. If they find your door open, one of the dogs will sneak inside and take up residence right in front of your hearth fire. Now you have a little dictator in the house, and if you don't treat her well, all sorts of ill fortune can befall your household. So, as a parent, it seems obvious that this story is a teaching tool for behavior modification. This is probably how they used to get their kids to shut the door when they were coming in from the outside instead of letting it hang open. Anyway, the Yule Cat story originates in the mythology of the goddess Freya and her two giant Norwegian forest cats who pull her sleigh through the sky. Freya is a vulva, a seeress who performs divination and magic. She also spins the wheel of fate. The Norse word Yule is kind of a homonym. It sounds like the same word as wheel. So the wreath you might hang on your door today is related to the sun wheels of Old Norse that they used to make from greenery to represent the wheel of the year itself. And remember Lucy the Hag? Well, she can transform into a cat and is known in Germany and the Netherlands as the Lucicat. She scratches and terrorizes bad children, as cat deities do, and so people eat bright yellow saffron-scented pastries to invoke the light, since the Lucicat is a fraidy cat when it comes to the light. In Nordic countries, the Yule cat actually starts her work way back in the harvest season when she spies on people to make sure they're doing their fair share to ensure enough food and supplies for the winter. One of the jobs of autumn was to weave the wool into new clothes that would be given at Christmas. Lazy humans could easily be identified by their tattered clothing and would be said to be given to the Christmas cat. Like they'd be given to the Yule cat, who would eat that lazy human for supper. So tonight, consider placing an offering outside for wild animals and birds. Perhaps decorate a tree with popcorn on a string, or offer a scattering of birdseed on the ground. In fact, in Renaissance Italy, they would toss some grain onto the roof of the house during the 12-cycle day of Yuletide. The belief was that then in the coming year, storks and other birds would not eat the grain in the field, and all the livestock would be fertile. Animal figurines on the altar or highlighting those animal decorations on your tree would be a really nice touch today. Take a moment to consider what medicine your favorite animals give you and why you love them so much. Maybe have ham for dinner or double up on the garlic in your side dishes to keep the vampires at bay. And of course, if you have a pet, tonight, they feast.